live debate. IntelligenceSquared.com.
I'm going to ask Benedict Allen to come up to the podium. Benedict, like most of the people on this stage, needs no introduction. Just remind you of some of his achievements: crossing the Amazon basin, the first to walk 1,000 miles down the Namib Desert, sole traverse of the Gobi Desert, most recently crossing the Siberia on a dog team across the Bering Straits. He's got 9 books to his credit, but perhaps most famously invented the role of the television adventurer, getting rid of the editor, the cameraman, and performing everything himself. He's now got the even greater challenge of looking after 2 small babies in Bristol.
Thank you, thank you. How are you all doing? There's only 3 more of us left, so hang on in there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, one of the prerequisites of being an explorer is that you report back. And what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about that process. I had written about 5 books about my different adventures and different peoples around the world. And one day, a very nice man, very polite man from the BBC, rang me up. It's the phone call that everyone's waiting for. And this man said, we've got this thing, a video camera, this invention. Would you like to take it on one of your journeys? And I thought, brilliant, money. And he said, no, we can't actually pay you, but could you just take this? And I said, oh, fine, where is it? And he said, well, no, you have to buy it, actually. The one I've got in my hand is mine, BBC property. But if you could secure one, could you film one of your adventures? So anyway, I thought this was a lovely idea. And I took this camera off. So how this tele career came about, I think it's sort of quite interesting in a way, that I had this idea of crossing the Amazon basin at its widest point from the Andes up there in the northwest right through there to Mato Grosso. And I took this little video camera along. Anita Roddick I'd met at a party, and she'd rashly said, is there anything I can do to help? And I couldn't think of anything at the time, but then I said, I need a camera. Very, very sweetly, she bought me this camera. So off I went to the Andes, very excited, started this big adventure, and I had this little camera. I don't know if I was suffering from the sun, but I sort of felt inspired while riding a horse along a cliff path to start my filming. And the horse just didn't like this idea, and it just went berserk and began running along this cliff path and just looked intent on committing suicide. And although, it would have been a lovely dramatic opening for my my filming career, but it wasn't looking at all good. And I just jumped off this horse and landed on the camera, cracked 3 ribs, and that was the beginning of my filming career. And I still had 3,500 miles to go of this journey. I don't know if you've broken your ribs. I mean, it's really bad. I was trying to carry a rucksack, really in agony. Got down to the lowlands, the river Putumayo, and saw these aircraft flying by. I thought, this is exciting. I'm on a major tributary of the Amazon, but why all this aircraft? Inevitably, it turned out I've come across the drug business. I won't go into this, but I thought, this is too good to miss. I've got to put this in my Amazon film. Got out my little camera. That's me in action. You can see how primitive the cameras were in those days. You can see how primitive I was, actually, my handling of it. This is one of my image I took from one of my first bits of film. You see a bag there, it's 2 kilos of cocaine. We obviously know all about that. No, this is just everyday life there. And, it's a busy trade, a cottage industry, very, very open. However, no one really liked me filming it. And I won't go on about this too long, but I found myself paddling my canoe up a very small tributary, trying to get away from 2 hitmen. And it actually wasn't all that funny at the time. I'm glad you think it was, but no, it's really quite serious. I was 20 meters ahead of this bloke in a canoe, and he had this big rifle, and I was essentially waiting to die. And it was, obviously being British, I didn't paddle too fast, but I was waiting for this terrible bullet in my back. And even though it really was a bad moment, but they kept on missing. It turns out that, I hadn't thought about this, assassins come in every different level, like every other profession. You get a first-class assassin, And then you get your, that one always gets it right somehow. Second class assassin who more or less gets the job done every time. And then you get the third rate hitman who makes a total mess of it every time. And that's what I had. These men weren't those two people, but they kept on missing me. And I discovered they couldn't multitask, these people. They didn't know how to effectively paddle a canoe and kill someone at the same time. And what happened in the end was they were going round and round in circles. I jumped from the canoe into the forest. And I got away with it. And this was very near where I jumped into. Suddenly, at a very important moment for me, I jumped into the forest, and I realized that I was suddenly safe. This forest that we're taught about as a place that's full of snakes and piranhas and all these terrible things, of course, that's vastly exaggerated. And in fact, now I had a haven. This place could look after me, and it was a reminder of perspective. We think of ourselves as explorers, but of course, this wasn't a hostile place to the indigenous people. It was their home. It gave them their food, their medicine, their shelter. And a huge reminder for me. I carried on, lived with the Matses Indians. They helped me learn some basic survival skills. But of course, it wasn't survival to them. As I said, it was just home. So these are the sort of things I was managing to start to convey. Needless to say, the BBC didn't want that film after all that. They did ask me to go back, and I did start a sort of tele-career. This is my second series. The BBC still didn't pay for it, I ought to say. This one's called The Skeleton Coast. Well, that's me, obviously, getting tangled up with my wires. But again, the camera started to work in all sorts of special ways. No longer was this business, you see on the telly expeditions, they all generally have to be set up for the camera crew, because otherwise the camera crew would die out there, and you wouldn't be able to get their vehicles in and so on. So things are set up. But this was wonderful, real live expeditions with all the nitty-gritty, the ups and downs, the hopes and fears. The key to this expedition turned out to be Nelson. There was this wonderful camel he was a very, very sheltered camel, I ought to say. But by getting him on my side, I managed to do this expedition. This is when he suddenly realized, walking up the Namib Desert, Southwest Africa, he realized that he had to go up and down sand dunes, which wasn't his thing. So at this stage, he's looking back home, wanting to give up. And things carried on. He'd never met a woman before. These are the people called the Himba, who are absolutely wonderful. They were training me before this expedition, helping me understand this arid environment. So that was another little incident there for Nelson. But the Himba were absolutely wonderful to me, brought me in, sheltered me again, coming through with the camels. And I discovered that the cameras were very, very good. They weren't, you know how difficult it is taking a still photo sometimes of people who are strangers. The camera actually, in this case, turned out to be a wonderful method of communication and bonding. The Himba would film themselves, do whatever they liked with my camera, and it was a way of really getting to know them. Meanwhile, Nelson, still having his troubles. This is a giraffe we came across. It's a bit of a weirdo giraffe. I don't know how to put it politely, but he wanted to have its wicked way with Nelson. Giraffes are very observant animals. They're very curious animals. I think it just thought that a camel was a sort of giraffe. And the giraffes aren't used to camels in Namibia. There's very, very few camels. But anyway, this camel kept on licking its lips, and it's all very disgusting. But again, these are the sort of things that could carry on. It's a bizarre incident, not at all normal on any expedition. But this sort of thing, the ups and downs of a real-life expedition was, I hope, bringing it alive to the audience. And finally, coming out of the Namib Desert, Nelson still wasn't totally happy. This is a sort of controlled descent. He's the last camel there. But we were working it out together. And actually, at the end of this expedition, I come to see that desert as more like home. And that's a lot of it for me. It's about trying to get rid of the exotic, trying to forget about things as the other, as I said earlier. It's about trying to see a place as somewhere that is, I suppose, seen on its own terms. And camels could do that for me, dogs in the Arctic, and of course the indigenous people all around the world who do see these places as home. And I'm sure Robin will talk about that in a second. This is me in Mongolia filming a vet, actually. if you're wondering what on earth's going on behind me, there's a horse being looked at. And then just about across the Gobi Desert, I'm being sold 3 of the dodgiest camels in the whole of the Gobi, which is why these 2 men are smirking. I think, I don't know, it's time up almost, 1 minute. I'll just tell you a bit about these camels in my last minute. The camel on the one on the left, that's, yes, he was called Bastion because he was meant to be the strongest camel, a very, very powerful beast. He staggered whenever I even put my little baby plastic tripod on the camel. So he was useless, but it was better than Djidjik, the middle camel. Djidjik was very clever. You don't want too many clever camels on your expedition. So he was no good. Then there was Bert. Bert only had 1 hump, and he was meant to have 2. He was a Bactrian camel. He also only had 1 eye, I couldn't help noticing. So anyway, I carried on with these expeditions. This is leaving the edge of the Gobi Desert as I entered with Kermit. You see, I'm talking to Djidjik, trying to bond with him. I knew he was going to be trouble. He was looking for escape routes all the time. Walking off alone now into the Gobi, 6 weeks ahead of me, 1,000 miles. Very, very exciting, very, very scary. No one in the world knew where I was going to be because I don't use a GPS or satellite phone because it's all about immersion. All about trying to get to grips with the place. So off I went, again trying to talk to Djidjik, the tricky one. Bert in the middle with his 1 hump, and Bastion carrying absolutely nothing at the end. Walking across the Gobi, sort of thinning out a bit. Beautiful, beautiful place, the Gobi Desert. Very, very exciting. But I remember talking to my camera at this stage saying, oh dear, it looks a bit like the moon. I don't think a camel's going to like it here. And Djidjik clearly heard this and was thinking, oh dear, it looks a bit like the moon, and I don't think a camel will like it here. And at this stage, he went on strike. He wouldn't move. He decided to walk home, which is what he did. And I'll just round up now by saying, thank goodness those 2 other camels did stick with me. But you would have thought, poor old Bert. I mean, even at this stage, my moment of need, Bastion didn't hang on with me. He still refused to carry anything. That's all I want to say about my expeditions. But as you see, for me, it's about immersion. It's about trying to get to grips with a place and see it as not alien. And in conclusion, I'd like to say that I think expeditions or exploration isn't really about a lot of the things that we think it's about. It's not about planting flags. It's not about conquering nature. It's not about going somewhere in order to make a mark. Or at least I don't think it should be. It's about opening yourself up, making yourself vulnerable, and allowing the place to make its mark on you. Thank you.